Good morning. For those of you who are just joining us, we will be getting started in just a minute or two. We'll be starting at 10 o'clock, so just in a couple more minutes. Thank you. Good morning. For those of you who are just joining us, we will get started here in about another minute. Thank you for your patience, and we look forward to the conversation. Good morning and welcome. For those of you who are just joining us, I see that we are steadily increasing our participants. So we will get started here in about another minute as we're watching participants join. Good morning and welcome to everyone who's joined us today for the Oregon Offshore Wind Energy Mapping Tool OROWIndMap Introductory Webinar. I see there are still some folks that are continuing to join. We've got a few introductory slides to share with you, and hopefully by the time we're ready with the meat of our presentation, we'll have all of our participants who have joined us. My name is Jamie Damon, and I work with Kearns and West, and I am supporting the Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management in this offshore wind planning process. I'm joined with me today are Whitney Hauer and Frank Pendleton from BOEM, who you will meet in a little bit, and Andy Lanier from the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development. If you have any help, if you need any help with technical difficulties, please make a note at the bottom of this first slide. You can contact Gillian Garber-Yance, and his email is right there if you want to write that down, or his phone number. You can text him, call him, or email him, and he can help you with any technical difficulties that you might have. Also note that this webinar will be recorded. Okay. So with that, second slide here is our agenda for the day. We're together for about an hour and a half. We have two presentations to share with you, and then we'll stop and take questions and answers at 11 o'clock, some closing remarks at 11:25, and we'll be done at 11:30. One note while we're looking at this agenda is it was brought to our attention that today is the Oregon Shake-Up, I guess it's the alert system. And so for those of us who have signed on to that, there may be a slight disruption in on your phones or potentially in our presentation when that occurs. We don't exactly know what time that will happen, but it's supposed to happen sometime here in the next hour and a half. So just to give you a heads up and not be alarmed. That it is it's a test of the alert system, and it just happens to be happening right during our presentation today. Next slide. So here's a few webinar participation tips. In this virtual environment, we've all become quite experts in working with the virtual environment, but just as a reminder to please join with audio either by phone or computer, but not both. You'll notice that as participants that you don't have the ability to mute or be on video, but you do have the ability to answer questions through the Q&A throughout the entire presentation. And we'll be monitoring those questions and answering them to the best we can as a part of the presentations, but we also will have time set aside at 11 o'clock to answer questions. And during the Q&A section, when we get to there at 11 o'clock, you can raise your hand. You'll see at the bottom of your screen, there's a place to raise your hand. You can also do that in the participants list, and we will answer questions in the order that they've been received. If you're joining us by phone, you can press *9, and that will raise your hand on the screen for us. We will spend the first few minutes in our Q&A going through written questions and answers, and then we'll switch to anybody who needs to ask a verbal question, and then we'll go back to our written questions. And again, the Q&A function will be available throughout the entire presentation, and we'll be tracking that and trying to answer questions along the way as a part of our presentations. This entire meeting will be recorded, and the meeting summary as well as the presentation will be posted on the BOEM website, and you can see the address there. So I'm going to just pause on this slide, go back one more. We'll pause on that slide just for a moment to make sure that everyone who has just joined us knows how to ask questions in the Q&A, knows how to get assistance for technical questions. And it looks like the participants, it looks like it's slowed down a little bit for who's joined us. So I think this might be our full group. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the meeting over to Whitney. And she can welcome herself. Yeah.
Thank you, Jamie. Hi, my name is Whitney Hauer. I'm a renewable energy specialist for the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management in the Pacific Regional Office. Our office is based in Camarillo, California. I'm also the BOEM Oregon Intergovernmental Renewable Energy Task Force Coordinator. And I just want to say a thank you to all the participants who have joined here this morning for this webinar. I'm going to provide an overview of the offshore wind energy planning effort to date in Oregon. Next slide. So for those of you who are not familiar with BOEM, our mission is to manage the development of energy and mineral resources on the outer continental shelf in an environmentally and economically responsible way. Environmental protection is critical and integrated into our decision-making process, and BOEM uses science to inform its environmental analysis, conduct consultations, and to design these critical studies that then inform decision-making. The jurisdiction on the U.S. West Coast is the Outer Continental Shelf, or the OCS, and it's in federal waters from 3 to 200 nautical miles. As depicted on the map on the left shows BOEM's jurisdiction, and it excludes national marine sanctuaries, which you can see grayed out in, off the coast of Washington and California. Next slide. Our renewable energy authorization process, this is specific to offshore wind, is a multi-year process. There are 4 discrete phases in this process, from planning and analysis to leasing, site assessment, and construction and operation. Next. In our planning and analysis phase, this begins with an intergovernmental renewable energy task force, which brings together governmental bodies to coordinate and inform BOEM for its decision making. Often in its planning, it begins with data gathering to collect data and information to inform a call for information and nominations. I want to note that today in Oregon, we have an intergovernmental renewable energy task force, and we are currently in this data gathering phase. It's early in the process. The call for information and nominations is BOEM's formal process to solicit feedback on an area identified, and also to solicit nominations requesting interest in that particular area for development. With that information from the call and its feedback, BOEM goes through a process called area identification to identify wind energy areas, or WEAs, that are then subject to further environmental review under the National Environmental Policy Act. Next slide. Then we move into our leasing phase, which includes a proposed sale notice, a final sale notice, auction, and then lease issuance. It's important to note that lease issuance does not allow for development in the waters, but instead provides the lessee or the developer the right to provide BOEM a site assessment plan and then a construction and operations plan for review and approval. Next slide. In our site assessment phase, the lessee has a 5-year period to characterize the site, and which includes the environmental information that it needs, its meteorological information, geophysical, geotechnical, and other biological surveys, all to inform its construction and operations plan. Next slide. This last phase in our authorization process begins when the lessee provides BOEM a construction and operations plan for both technical and environmental review. That environmental review again includes NEPA review. There are other subsequent reports that are required before construction is authorized. And I also want to note that BOEM has a strong decommissioning requirement in the form of financial assurance, and then also has decommissioning requirements as a part of the authorization. As I just provided a short overview of our multi-year process, I again want to highlight that in Oregon, we are in the early phases of this planning with data gathering. Next slide. As I briefly mentioned, with BOEM and Oregon's Intergovernmental Renewable Energy Task Force, this is a body that provides input into our leasing process. The task force for Oregon began in 2011, but was reinvigorated over the last few years, specifically for offshore wind. In September of 2019, the task force met to discuss the offshore wind planning approach, and from that meeting, it resulted in BOEM and its state partner in this effort, the Department of Land Conservation and Development, to draft a data gathering and engagement plan to outline what planning would look like for the state of Oregon. Last summer, in June of 2020, that task force met again to discuss that plan, and at the meeting, it resulted in BOEM and the state of Oregon committing to an offshore wind energy planning process. That plan was finalized with feedback given at the task force meeting, and it's available on our website at boem.gov/Oregon. Next slide. As detailed in the plan, the data gathering effort is roughly a 12-month process with the start of the finalization of the data gathering plan from the fall of 2020, planning to run through this fall of 2021. The Oregon Offshore Wind Mapping Tool, or OROWIndMap, is the tool that BOEM and the state are using to collect that data and to provide data visualization to the public. The potential area for leasing is in federal waters offshore Oregon, where offshore wind is economically and technically viable in water depths of less than 1,300 meters and with an average wind speed of at least 7 meters per second. As you can see on the map on the left, this shows that this planning effort is for the entire coastline, and the planning area itself is larger in that we're collecting data and information from both state and federal waters and onshore with any relevant or pertinent data to inform offshore wind energy development. Next slide. That concludes my presentation. I'd like to hand this over to Frank Pendleton for his presentation. Thank you.
And hello, I'm just checking in to make sure I can be heard.
Yep, you sound good, Frank.
All right, great, thank you. All right, well, my name is Frank Pendleton, and I'll be giving you a little talk about data sets. I'm the GIS specialist at BOEM. Wait, got something popping up here. There we go. All right, I'm the GIS specialist here at BOEM, and for those of you unfamiliar, it's basically computer mapping. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about a few different data sets, show you some samples, some of the things we're using, and just how some data sets are developed. So next slide, please. All right, we'll start with wind. We're looking at offshore wind. So this data set we get from NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab. And this is just a subset of a bigger data set they have called the Wind Toolkit, and it's available on their Wind Prospector site. And if you look at this data over on the right, you see the different colored polygons. That's the average wind speed for all those areas for the year. And this is in meters per second. And what you can see is the gray is the places where the wind is too slow. And you can see a bit about down by San Francisco and a bit way up in northern Washington. Oregon has good wind speed all around. But anyone who's got a kid, you show them something like this and you say, yeah, but how did you get this wind speed? So let's go to the next slide here. Right, and we're making those polygons out of these points that are created by NREL. Right, and what you can see here is the map on the right is it's a January data set, and it's all created out of points. And if you look just a little bit to the left of the map there in the legend, you'll see down at the bottom there's specific monthly offshore wind speeds. And there's data sets for every different month as well as an annual subset. So then me being much like a 3-year-old and asking questions, I said, yeah, but where did these points come from? And I asked that question to the scientist at NREL. And she first sent me some papers with a lot of calculus and other fancy words, but next slide, you can see what she sent me next. That I said, I need a picture, which I'm a simple guy. And she sent me this. And this gets to this idea we're gonna see a lot of today, is data sets that are coming from many sources and being put into one overarching data set. And this is the idea with their wind data set. They're getting wind speed data from satellite data, from weather ships, from buoys. So it's coming from all over and they're bringing it together in this one overarching data set, which is kind of the main wind data set that folks are using. All right, that's it for the wind. If you can go on to the next slide, please. Now we'll talk a bit about depth. This is the bathymetry data set, and this one comes from NOAA. And you'll see this theme. We're working a lot with different partners, different data creators who are kind of the experts in that field. In this case, it's NOAA making the bathymetry maps. So you can see the blue map there on the left, and that is just depth. we've taken it and said, where it's deeper, make it darker blue, simple enough to follow. Depth, very important for where offshore wind can go. But then we can also take this data set and look at it just a little bit different and derive slope. So on the right, you see the slope data set. And as folks know, green are happy places and red are not so happy places. Where it gets really steep is where we've turned it red. And that's obviously a concern for us in offshore wind. It kind of gives us a red flag, lets us know there's a lot of things that could be happening in steep places. Steep places in the ocean tend to be harder. Harder places tend to be tougher places to put an anchor. Also places where you might find things like corals and things like that. So things of concern. So that's another data set, our depth and our slope. Next slide, please. This thing of obvious concern to offshore wind, where are you going to plug it in? Right? Where, if you're creating this electricity out in the ocean, how are you going to get it onto the grid and get it to where the people are? In this case, we have the grid connection data set. It's a simple enough data set to understand where are the substations and where are the transmission lines coming from them. So simple enough to understand, but obviously very important in the planning effort. And you can see again, this is from the Homeland Infrastructure Foundation level data. And yes, we're the government, so people tend to call it HIFLD or whatever. But you can again see this is coming from a lot of different agencies, all reputable folks about where are these things. Okay, up to the next. Now we're going to change over to kind of a different idea, some of these example of density grids. And we're going to start with vessel traffic. So, just getting to the idea of how much does this take place in an area. So with vessel traffic, we're going to look at two different sets of data. These data are both satellite tracking data. In the first case of the AIS data, the whole purpose of it is collision avoidance. And it's a Coast Guard data set. And we reuse it to find out where the boats have gone. Some boats don't need it, only boats over 300 gross tonnage. And to get that to, and something that your average person understands, that tends to be about 65 feet, right? Give or take. Gross tonnage and feet aren't the same, but it gives you an idea of the size of boats we're dealing with. And in this case, we've got data from 2009 to 2020. And this data is readily available. Anyone can go to this site here, the Marine Cadastre, and get it if you're interested. And we've analyzed all speeds. So that's one way for us to get to where the boats are. Another way is this whole different system called the Vessel Monitoring System, or VMS. And this system is created for fisheries management. And thus NOAA is managing it, particularly their Office of Law Enforcement, because it's to make sure where boats are going. Now the folks who are required to have it are certain federally managed fisheries. And the data sets we have is from 2010 to 2018. And this is confidential data, so we have to analyze it to such and such a level before we can share it. And in this case, we're looking at just fishing speeds when we get to this. So boats that are going slower, so they might be fishing. All right, next slide. Now we're going to look at a few different sets of the AIS data and then one of the VMS. This is the all vessels. So any vessel that is required to have an AIS, this gives us kind of a look at it. And on the left side there, we're looking at the whole West Coast. And on the right side, it's just Oregon, which is kind of easier for us to grasp, smaller area, and we can kind of see the details a bit better. And so this is all ships, so no matter what they're doing out in the water. And you'll see, as you look at some of the trends you can see here, you see a couple of those two green lines all to the far left of your screen, right? You'll see those, and you can see kind of that fatter green area, and you see kind of the red areas that pop out to us. And we'll see as we go through these other slides, which boats are creating those kind of high density areas. Next. So this gets us the cargo ships, and we can see they're kind of staying right on that edge, that right around our 1,300 meter depth. That just gives you an idea where they fit, and obviously a lot of them coming in and going out of the Columbia River. All right, next. Now off to the tankers. Obviously it's a bigger deal if a tanker goes ashore, so my guess is they're required to stay further off and further offshore, so if anything goes wrong. And here we can see how the tankers were those lines way far out. All right, the next slide. Now this is the tugs and tows, and you can see they've got various lanes they're supposed to stay in, and they're doing a pretty good job of staying in their lanes. Because you can see, like, the green, that's not many ships, right? 1 to 5 ships in a year. That's not much at all. It's not till we get up to that yellow and particularly the orange where they're really using it. Next slide. Now this is going to take us into fishing, and we always have the caveat with AIS data for fishing, because what we said early on is only boats larger than 65 feet or so are required to have it. Some smaller have it, but not all. But this gives you a view into where the fishing data fit in this, that there's some particularly key spots where a lot of folks are fishing. And we're going to take this is the AIS data, right, which is designed to keep boats from banging into each other. The next one is going to be the VMS data. So let's take a look at that. And you can see how similar they are to where the hot spots are. Here we've deleted some things, we're just doing where are they fishing, where are they going at fishing speeds, and trying not to get so much of the transiting, but you can see how similar they are. Okay, now let's go ahead on to the next slide. This is getting at this same idea of where is it busy fishing, but from a whole different perspective, a whole different data set. And here we're starting with, this data is coming again from other experts, from the folks at NMFS, the National Marine Fisheries Service, and particularly their Northwest Fisheries Science Center. And they're getting at it from different data sets, being observers, state logbooks, fish tickets. That's when you land and you say, we caught so many fish of this type. So they're getting at this same data set from a very different angle, which is great. They got a lot of different information in there, but still getting the idea of where's the ocean busy. And it's nice to see all our data sets are kind of lining up. So this is a data set. You can see this one. It's already on OROWInd. Next. And now another completely different way to get at this fishing idea. This data is part of the Territorial Sea Plan for Oregon. And they had a participatory mapping exercise where they went out and talked to fishers in different ports. And the fishers told them, these are the places that are important to us. This data is owned by the fishers and it's by port. So you can see there on the map that I've got 4 of them up there that are all overlapping by each other, but you can find out where are the important places to the different fishers by the port. Again, another way to get at this same idea of where are the busy, important fishing areas. Okay, on to the next one. Right now we're still in this world of density, but we're going to get to a whole different data set and a whole different idea. We're going to look at birds and marine mammals really quickly. And we'll start with the different, kind of the process. The first thing is, how do you get your data, about where are the birds? And so that's the ways to use survey. And you can survey from ships. You can, with observers on a ship, you can have observers in an airplane, or you can have airplanes taking photos that you can use later. And all of this data can be used to create a model to give us more insight. So the next slide. So to get to the aerial survey idea, so an aerial survey with an observer on board. Several of these were done with the folks from USGS, so US Geological Survey, and it was a USGS BOEM study. They did a lot of surveys off the coast of Oregon, Southern Washington, and Northern California, 2011 and 12. 6 different surveys where someone is sitting in the back of the plane IDing the birds as they fly over. Plane flying very low, getting a good idea of where all these birds were on that particular day. And you can see in the all surveyed, take you to the far left there. And you can see the all surveyed. So that's all these surveys. Where was it thickest with the most birds? And then the other 6 to the right are telling you on a specific survey. And for anyone who's like an ornithologist, real serious bird person, realize we understand that lumping them all together is not how you want to look at birds. But this is just to give folks an idea of where the birds are and the types of data we have. So let's go on to the next slide. Now, another way to actually get the data is aerial photos. This is a bit newer, and it's going on now down in Southern California. And what this allows is a plane to fly really high and take pictures, which allows us to have a permanent record of what was seen. And then we can use artificial intelligence to help with the ID process. So in the top picture, you see the top right there, you see the red circle. it's a pelican inside there. And then you can see, you can zoom in a bit closer and get, yeah, okay, we could ID this bird to species. Down below, you can see the dolphin that's also getting ID'd during this this flight. One more picture so we can get marine mammals, birds, sea turtles, lots of variety of species from the same survey. And then the box you see there on the left, this is getting to the artificial intelligence idea. So someone doesn't have to look at every single part of every picture. That IDing, what is a bird? In this case, what is a sun glint? So I think you can kind of see we've got the 5 birds and 4 sun glints, and that would get us to, okay, now we know what's real data. Okay, on to the next slide, please. Now, when we can take that, we know where the birds were, and now we can start modeling it and saying, well, where are the birds likely to be, right? Because we can only go out so often and so many places. So we really need to be able to take that and model it across the whole coast. So it gets to be looking at a lot of different variables. Here's just a few of them. Like what time of year was it when we saw that bird? What latitude were we at? How north-south? How deep was the water? What was the slope? How far from shore? The currents, salinity, how green was the water? How much chlorophyll? And several other factors go into that to model where the birds are likely to be. And these are getting better and better. This data set isn't out just quite yet, but it's will be coming out soon and be very useful for looking at the birds. So next slide. And this is our last one. And you can see how we're kind of getting to the same, going through the same process, but for marine mammals. And on the left there, you can see where the ship surveys are. And these are very expensive. So in the years since 1991 to 2014, they had done 8 surveys. There's always more going on. The models are always getting better, and new data is always being produced. So here's one. This is coming from the folks at NIMS again, and they're doing a great job with this and working with a lot of different folks to bring this data of where are the most marine mammals at different times of year in the ocean. So, and with that, I believe that's my last slide. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Frank. Just confirming you can hear me.
Yes, all good.
All right, thank you. Well, my name is Andy Lanier. I'm the Marine Affairs Coordinator. I work in the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development. And first thing I want to do today is to recognize that the work that I'm presenting in the development of our catalog and the OROWIndMap tool has leveraged a lot of time and energy from a lot of different people. So I wanted to just take a moment and thank those individuals. First, to the development team who works on our technical enhancements at EcoTrust. They've been amazing partners to work with. The system that we use is actually very similar to the system that supports the Mid-Atlantic Regional Ocean Data Portal as well. So the work that we do is open source, and when we make development progress on our system and our tools, we actually help the systems across the nation. The portal development and coordination teams that have been a part of maintaining the West Coast Ocean Data Portal over time. If folks are on the line who are part of those teams, I just want to call you out and thank you for that effort. And then finally, to thank NOAA and BOEM who have made it possible to make this tool available. Next slide, please. So my organization, the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development, is host to Oregon's federally approved coastal zone management program. That program has a role to steward Oregon's territorial sea plan in concert with Ocean Policy Advisory Council and with my agency's commission. As such, I am staff to the stakeholder advisory body in the state, and am staff to a program that has been charged with maintaining data catalogs and archives that have been associated with the previous spatial planning efforts the state of Oregon has engaged in. Those included the marine conservation area planning exercises in the late 2000s, the exercise to amend Oregon's territorial sea plan for marine renewable energy within state waters. That's part 5 of the territorial sea plan. And as support for those efforts, my agency has maintained the Oregon Coastal Atlas, which is the project archive, the data archive of the information that's been gathered there that was used to make those decisions. We also maintain and host the Oregon Ocean Information website portal that provides additional kind of process support, outreach information, and direct access to some of the specific data catalogs that were part of those efforts. But in addition to kind of the coastal and marine data that our state has developed over time, the state of Oregon already has an existing GIS data infrastructure. It's overseen by the Oregon Geospatial Enterprise Office. And there is a number of framework teams where agencies from around the state develop information products that are crucial to supporting multiple business use cases for the state. So that includes transportation, it includes imagery, it includes utility information. All of those are types of information that are stored within the GIS kind of data catalogs that are maintained via the Oregon Spatial Data Library. And some of those data sets are served on a case-by-case basis through the Oregon Explorer tool. One example of a project that I have been working on recently is the Oregon Renewable Energy Siting Assessment Project, the ORESA project. That project has been looking at renewable energy across the state of Oregon, all types, and has included offshore marine hydrokinetic as well as offshore wind. So the work that is happening as a part of those projects will feed back into the data catalog that we have as well. So all that is to say that the state of Oregon has a pretty mature GIS infrastructure. We have a lot of archives that we can bring to bear as we look at this new issue. But then we also want to recognize the hard work and the data that is provided by our partners at the federal level. And whether that's at a programmatic level, like a fisheries office within NOAA, or up higher at a project level like the multi-purpose marine cadastre. Those are systems that we have worked with over time. We have developed connections to as a part of the West Coast Ocean Data Portal and the West Coast Ocean Alliance. That has served well to help to maintain those connections to the catalogs. And I'm speaking not only of the technical connections to the places that provide the data, but also the human network that's important, so that when we have questions, we know who to contact from those different offices to make sure that we are receiving the best authoritative data that we can. So the West Coast Ocean Data Portal has had an infrastructure in place. And when the state and BOEM engaged in or decided to engage in a planning process, we decided to leverage the work that had already been done to create a curated offshore wind catalog and a curated offshore wind visualization tool. And that's what I'm going to be presenting to you today. I do want to highlight a couple of things about the work that we do. And the first of which is that as an organization generally, the portal does not store data. So we don't try and wrap our arms around download and then redistribute everything, because that provides a huge maintenance workload requirement. Instead, we have decided to connect to those other entities through published metadata catalogs and GIS web service providers. So we don't store the data, we call upon the ecosystem of our digital service layers that is provided by those entities across the West Coast and in some cases nationally. That being said, for Oregon and BOEM's planning process in particular, we as an agency, the Department of Land Conservation and Development, have the ability to publish data through services that can then be consumed and helpful and informative for our users as we proceed with our planning exercise. Next slide, please. So we now have a data catalog and a mapping tool. And this slide really just demonstrates the established pathways to find it. So you can go straight to the Regional Ocean Data Portal website to get there. There's a link directly from there. There's a link directly from the BOEM Oregon Activities webpage, as well as from the Oregon Ocean Information Planning website. And at this time, I would like to share my screen and do a live demo of the portal. And you will need to enable my screen sharing. Okay, just to confirm, are you now seeing the data portal?
Yes, it looks good, Andy.
Okay, thank you. So the first thing that I want to point out is that the data portal, through kind of maintenance and technical enhancements updates, as a portal itself was updated last year to kind of some of the latest, greatest open source technology. So that includes the fact that we are using the ESRI GeoPortal 2 open source software, and our content management system is managed by the Wagtail program. The offshore wind tool map tool uses a separate system entirely called Open Layers, and that has a Django database backend that allows us to organize the collection of web services into the structure that you'll see today. The goal of the data portal has been to facilitate the discovery of data in as quick a way as we can get you to it. And I'll just point out a couple of things right here on the homepage. The first of which is if you want to go directly to the mapping tool to see the data, there's a tile that says offshore wind planning on the front page that will get you there. But I'm going to explore some of these other tabs first to show you and demonstrate the use of the Esri GeoPortal technology to look within the records that have been harvested from our network of partners across the West Coast. So on the right, you will get a number of records that are returned from the catalog. You can see in sum total, we have a little bit over 800 records to pick through. And the first search technique is just to use keywords. And you can get to a very quick kind of listing of data from keyword search. And you can use keyword search. You can use any of these search facets, which are these search items on the left side of the page to narrow your search. You can also use the addition of and or not as language to define, to further refine your search. So I could say kelp, not crab, because there was a crab layer that just appeared that I saw. So you can use keywords in a very flexible manner to subset your search right from the beginning. Let me clear that. You can also use the map to very quickly identify data layers that are present either in an area, so a data set can be to intersect the area within which we're looking, or it can be within the area within which we're looking. And these are based upon the extent rectangles provided in metadata records, and you can see those appear as you look at the map. You can also search by time period. So in this instance, I want to narrow my search down to the last 20 years or so. So you can move the slider, click on the time period, and then again subset the information based upon the date fields within the metadata that are part of the records in the catalog. The next and probably the most value add that we provide as a data portal is that the records that we've included in the system, we have added a curation step. So records that come from different places don't necessarily have a tag that's associated with a specific organizational scheme that we on the West Coast have developed and been using almost for the last decade now. And this has come out of the West Coast Coastal Atlas community, this idea of an established data dictionary and hierarchy. And as we add records to the system, we add tags so that you can specifically subset the searches that are related. A single record can have more than one tag so that it can be present in more than one category within the system. And then finally, I'd like to show probably one of the most important, which is that this is the network of data providers that we have connected to date. It includes many of those partners I've already mentioned, and you can very quickly select a partner to look within their catalog, and then you can look at the curated kind of organization within that catalog to find a record. I should mention also then what you do with a record, or what's possible to do with a record. The first of which is that, and hopefully they have good metadata, but within the abstract of a data file, you will see a description of what that data is itself. You will see a date that's published. You will see the source, and you will get a link to, or a list of the links. And if you click on this list, it will take you to the service or the server that is providing that data as a service. And if you want to explore that data, you can actually look and see what other layers are available from that particular service. And you can ask it to open up in a separate map viewer. I like to use the ArcGIS Online map since that's kind of the most standard format. So you can really get at and explore the data from our partners that's provided by the links to the metadata. And you can use this to create a map on your own if you'd like, if you have an ArcGIS Online account, or you want to reference it through other services. So that's really the power of the tool, is it gets you to a record that you're interested in, provides you with an understanding of where it comes from. It gives you a sense of who to contact, how it was originated, all of which are then helping you to understand the information that's been made available by the system. We also have some pages that specifically have links to things like interactive story maps. We only have a subset of those, and those were developed in years previous by the West Coast Ocean Data Portal community. But what I wanted to direct your attention to was kind of the recent data themes option. And if you click on one of these tiles, it will take you to the OROWIndMap viewer with a set of the resources within that viewer that have been specifically curated related to that topic. But I'm not going to go there yet. I want to take you to the offshore wind mapping tool, OROWIndMap, directly from the homepage so that you can see what it looks like, and so that we can provide an orientation to that. So here you can see the tool is laid out like many mapping tools, with a mapping visualization kind of area on the right, with a catalog of the information and kind of how you control the information that's in the map viewer on the left. You have standard features like the ability to choose the base map that you would like to use. Like I like to use satellite imagery if I'm looking at data that it might be hard to see because it provides a dark background. There are tools in the upper left here that I will mention in a bit, but one of the things that we heard when we first started rolling out this tool and showing it to some of our local partners before this webinar was that we got a request for linear measurement tool, and we've now made that possible. So we are taking a request for technical enhancements and keeping a list so that when additional funding becomes available, we can address those. But you can see the catalog on the left here is organized consistent with kind of the big hierarchical data organization themes from the catalog. They're not quite the same because we didn't have the option of nesting as many kind of thematic groupings in this interface. So, you know, some of these areas, some of the themes have been brought up to have more prominence. And, you know, the first thing you might want to do is understand a context of a setting. So what I want to do is I want to demonstrate that you can very quickly get to a layer of information that you're searching for from the keyword search right at the top if you don't know where in the catalog it might be located. In this instance, I just turned on the planning area that was shown on the slides earlier. Again, the depth contour is at that 1,300 meter depth mark. And I did see a question in there earlier. I believe that depth range was provided to BOEM by the industry as the technical limit of their ability to do anchoring. And so what I'm going to do with you today is slowly build up some context to understand Oregon's outer continental shelf and to demonstrate the functionality of the system. Okay, so I've now turned on 3 layers of information. You can see that in the active panel up here on the upper left of the kind of data organizational system. And I can see on the map here that the contours themselves have kind of overshadowed the planning area. And so the first thing I want to point out is you can rearrange the order of these items to make, so the layers that are on the bottom are on the lowest visual priority range. And then you can do things like adjust the opacity of a layer so that you can still see it, but maybe it's not as distracting if you're trying to focus in on something else. Again, we have that 1,300 meter kind of depth mark. And you can see that in this instance, it's being overshadowed by that extent of the planning area, which was at that same level. So by moving these around, by adjusting opacity and by adjusting the order, you can really customize and begin to understand with the service layers that are provided, different contextual pieces of information. So as I mentioned, I want to build this kind of from the ground up. You know, it's important to understand depth of the continental shelf, but it's also important to understand kind of the superficial geological habitats that are there. So you can turn on a layer of the habitats, and this is provided by the Active Tectonics and Seafloor Mapping Lab at Oregon State University. It's a product that has been worked on over a number of years and combines data from many different bathymetric survey and other types of survey to create an understanding of where rocky habitats exist on the continental shelf. If you're interested in understanding some of the confidence of that layer, you can look at kind of where some of the bathymetric surveys have existed, so you can see kind of data quality. And I do want to communicate the fact that uncertainty is inherent when we are looking at any map layers out on the outer continental shelf. They each have different time horizons, different strengths and weaknesses associated with how the data was created, how uncertainty was handled within that information. So those are important things to think about and to consider as you are exploring the West Coast region here, and in particular Oregon's outer continental shelf. What I'd like to do now is demonstrate some of the other features. And we have a number of different wind products Frank mentioned, and so we do have an annual average, and this is often what you see when you are looking at kind of a summary throughout the year of the averaged wind speeds, which is informative, but maybe we actually want to look at wind monthly averages. And when we do that, one of the things we can do is say, well, now we have a different use of the technology system to present a picture about how the wind speed changes throughout the year. So here is what we call a data slider. And this is for data that exists in the same geographic space but has different timestamps. You can actually get a picture of how that information changes over time. And if you want to understand the legend and the symbology here, you can open that up and you can see that there's a cutoff point at which values of a speed below 7 have been symbolized as being gray, whereas other values are in color. So I'm gonna pause this. You can move this just by clicking the slider on the time horizon that you're interested in. And again, it's very informative to see maybe how wind speed does change throughout the year. And again, these are averages from that NREL data set that Frank mentioned earlier. We also have a number of different types of human uses that are present in the data catalog. And one of the ones I think about is specific infrastructure. So in the case that we already have something that has been built, we do have subsea cables that cross the outer continental shelf, both for telecommunication and for research. And here you can see those layers symbolized, similarly to what you might find on a nautical chart. As Frank demonstrated, we also have the electrical power station, substations, and transmission lines, so that you can begin to see kind of how the landward system could support or not potential development out offshore. So hopefully that gives you a good understanding of the kinds of things that you can do with the information that we are providing in the system, the flexibility that you have in the ability to order, rearrange those data sets that are there. And again, remember that these are all being provided by web services coming from the authoritative sources themselves. So if we get notice from one of those sources that their services are changing or they've added new layers, we have to make sure that we have the right connection details, but then it's almost immediately implemented in our system because the provider is the one who's keeping control of the data. Now, a couple of the other features that I wanted to highlight specifically are, if you like a map that's been created, we have the opportunity to share it. So in this bookmark here, if you wanted to share this with somebody for discussion purposes, you can copy this URL, you can load it into another view, and the system will remember the state at which and the organization within which you have created that map. So again, a very powerful tool for being able to share information from what you have explored with others. And I do want to point out that this is exactly what we have done with with the data themes. So as an example, I have loaded all of the fisheries related data into a map. You could get there by going to the portal, by going to data themes and clicking on the fisheries. Now it does take a while to load the data from the service providers. So I have pre-cached this for now. So you may have to wait a while after you've gone to the system for those service layers to come up. But again, here you can see that we have connected to data from the Pacific Fisheries Management Council. Here's an interesting layer that provides landmarks and areas that they use as a part of their management decisions. Again, it may take a little bit of time once you turn a layer on for that service to respond. Frank demonstrated a number of fisheries pieces of information like trawling as an example. So you could turn on a layer, and here you see that we do have multiple time slices for the specific fisheries. Again, this information is coming directly from the NOAA Fisheries Research and Monitoring Group. And now you can see actually that service that I turned on originally, showing kind of the area uses, some of the latitudinal lines that describe oftentimes where they use landmarks as in-season change. And then you can see up at the top here the number of data layers that you have active. And so again, Frank had demonstrated that there are basically two different kind of sources for fisheries data that we have currently, with some additional information being developed. So here I've turned on passenger fishing vessels. So this is going to be much kind of smaller vessels, not commercial fishing, but they show the importance of the area immediately around the port of Astoria from that community's perspective. Okay, I am going to conclude the demo. I think I've gone through all of the kind of features I wanted to share. So Bianca, if you can start sharing the PowerPoint again. So as I mentioned previously, we are continuing to develop our system over time. This introductory webinar is just that. We are kind of at the early stages still of work on our system. And in particular, the big area of improvement that I expect to see in the near future is a section of data library pages that are going to be more beneficial for browsing the information specifically within OROWIndMap to have the lists of the data that are specifically provided in those kind of hierarchical categories that you saw on the OROWind mapping tool. Additionally, we have kind of coming along the pike updates for the different data sets that you see here. So we are awaiting information from NOAA, USGS, and BOEM project to develop those marine bird predictive models, in addition to the marine mammals predictive models. And then there is a couple of other layers of importance, one of which is that in 2015, the data portal produced a West Coast fisheries closures layer. That was a summary of all the different types of closure areas across the West Coast. That product is being updated to our recent time horizon. And then we are in the development of a planning analysis layer. So using the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management aliquot grids, you'll be able to filter a layer based upon certain criteria like depth or slope or distance from shore, so that you will have different areas on the continental shelf that kind of get highlighted depending upon the criteria that you select in a filter. And then finally, we do have additional software upgrades that we are keeping in mind. The first of which is, in addition to the linear measurement tool, we've had requests for the ability to do area calculations. So that one is for sure in our next technical enhancements set of items. And then we have heard that there's a demand for individuals to be able to have a user account, log onto the system, and be able to store maps that they've created and potentially share those maps, excuse me, with a set of user groups that could be self-selected. And so communities that are interested in working together using the maps and the tools that we've provided can do so. Next slide, please. So, one of the goals of sharing our tool and our data catalog with you today is to let you know that if you're aware of additional data and information, geospatial data and information, we would love to hear about it. If they can cover any of the categories that you are interested in, we're really most specifically focused on Oregon for this effort, but if it's at the scale of the West Coast, we are happy to accept that as well. While we are focused on geospatial information specifically, is not required. There are, there's the ability to store other resources, publications, PDFs in a catalog format that's searchable using the same kind of techniques that I've demonstrated. But we do want to make sure that at the very minimum, we have good metadata associated with those products. So understanding how it was made, who is providing it, where it's being provided from, those types of things are important. And this data sharing guide that you see on the right is available from the BOEM Oregon website, and it has our contact information. So if you'd like to share with us, we welcome that. Next slide, please. And then finally, later in the year, the state and BOEM will be seeking kind of feedback and comment from interested parties on the data that has been gathered. We want to be able to provide a sense of the quality of that, kind of the focus of the different data efforts and whether or not there are gaps. And that will really help us to understand how to prioritize future information gathering or how to search for additional information that may be out there existing currently that we don't currently have. Virtual meetings of this group are likely, and contact myself or Frank if you are interested in participating in that. We only have a very short list of participants at this time, but I presume that that will grow as our outreach efforts proceed throughout the year. Next slide, please. I believe that concludes my portion of the presentation.
Great, thanks, Andy. So now we're going to move into our question and answers. As you've noticed, there have been some answers put in the Q&A already during the presentations, but we're going to start with the earliest question first. And we're going to do these question and answers for probably about 10 minutes and then check and see if there are any verbal questions and then go back to the written questions. So just a reminder, you can add questions in the Q&A at any time and raise your hand to get in the queue during the verbal time. If you've joined by phone, use the *9. So the questions are visible to everybody. And we've been doing some assignments among us about who's going to answer. I'm going to start with the first question that was posed, which is from Pedro. The question reads, some organizations in Europe use also the duration of a certain threshold of wind speed. How is the variability of the wind speed considered in these maps? A single average value of the wind speed may be misleading. And I believe this question is for Frank.
Yes, and it's great that I think, since that question came up, you saw a little more from what Andy showed with the monthly wind, but also getting, more directly to your question, we are actually in the process of making what did you use? Threshold. That's exactly it. Threshold. How many months average above 7 meters per second? How often between 5 and 9 in the evening, are we at that? So just to really get, when is it the most useful? And yes, do we have good winds all the time? So yes, we're absolutely getting at that. It's a good question.
Great, Frank. And you're still up. The second question is from Colleen. How can or will you map vessel traffic for vessels using VMS that travel faster than 5 knots?
Yes, and that gets us to the idea of transiting, and which is also important. So we are doing that. That's part of the process of the data we're creating with VMS, and that will be in there.
Okay, thanks. Whitney, the next question is for you. It's from, I believe it's pronounced Noe. Their question is, now that so much data is easily available, does BOEM have plans to propose call areas in Oregon? If yes, what would be the timeline for auctions and leases? So Bianca, if you want to go to that slide.
Hi, great. Thanks for the question. This was one of our backup slides in case we had a question in terms of potential timeline. So I just wanted to, this is a timeline of the authorization process that brings us to the auction itself and lease issuance. We're currently in this BOEM state planning effort, as I went over in the presentation on the far left, which is that brown box there is about a 1-year effort. The purpose of this effort is to collect this data and information to inform a call. We don't have a timeline for when that call would be, but in terms of our data gathering and engagement effort as outlined in the plan, which is available online, this effort would be culminated with a summary report of the effort, and then call together a task force meeting to discuss the results of this engagement effort. And then after that task force meeting would likely come a call, but beyond the hope for a task force meeting this fall, we don't have any specific timelines.
Great, thank you. The next few questions, Andy, are for you. Hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at them in the Q&A. The first one's from Marjorie. For the Oregon speaker, can you pull up and display data from different time frames in order to compare them? For example, any changes in prime fishing grounds in 2000, 2010, and 2020 or other species?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I demonstrated in, I think, my portion of the presentation, the existing time slices for the different fisheries data that is currently available. So you can quickly get to a time slice for a specific fishery, like a hook and line fishery or a pot fishery. Those are all dependent upon whether or not they are available from the NOAA research office that has provided those data themselves. But when they do exist along those time slices, you can very quickly choose to turn them on and off in the data viewer, overlay them, or make them transparent so that you can understand the difference between one and the other. Again, that is limited by the data source providers. The Oregon fisheries data products specifically, those that are organized by port or by state, because there were some statewide products that were generated. Those asked the fishermen to participate in a mapping exercise where they, over the lifetime of their experience, where they would place value on specific geographies in the ocean. And then those were individual fishermen's responses were aggregated with the response from their peers in their communities, or at the statewide level, to produce a map that basically summarized across the port or across the state the importance during their lifetime as a fisherman. So those are single time products relating to the lifetime of that fisherman's experience. And those were produced in 2011. So they're now becoming a little dated.
Thanks. The next three questions are still for you, Andy. The next one's from Christine. Is there a way to get to metadata?
Yes, Christine, thank you for asking that. There are metadata links in the catalog. You can look at the, for any specific record that's there, there's an option to view HTML or XML, which are the different kinds of reporting formats that the GeoPortal system provides. We're actually working to make sure that the GeoPortal 2.0 is pulling the right fields and providing the right information. So in some instances, we're still making tweaks to how that is there. But the metadata should be available through links to those service providers and their catalogs that you can get to.
All right, and then from Shiloh, also for you, Andy, are seabird nesting locations provided in the catalog?
Yes, they are. If you look for seabirds in OROWIndMap, there is a colony data layer that provides relative ecological importance information, and that has been provided by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as part of their ongoing management of the Oregon Islands National Wildlife Refuge. So that data is present. It's called Seabird Colony Relative Ecological Importance, and you can find it in the birds portion of the catalog.
Great. The next question is for all the panelists, and it is from Aaron, who asks, will any of the speakers be attending the IPF 2021 in Richmond, Virginia this year in August?
I have not made any plans to do so at this time.
And Frank, Whitney?
Do not know. I have not made any plans, but let's face it, everything will also be COVID dependent.
Yeah, same response. Thank you.
Next question is from Angie, and I'm not quite sure who to punt this one to. I'll read it and you folks can think about it. The spatial footprint of wind farms is fairly large, and from what I've read, excludes fishing vessels within the space. How are you working with small boat vessels to ensure you're not affecting them? We wouldn't want to negatively impact Oregon's coastal economy to provide energy to California. Is this a Frank question, perhaps?
That's more a fisheries outreach question than a data creation question. So all I can say is there's definitely fishery outreach will be going on. I'm working on the side of creating the BMS data set.
Whitney, anything to add?
Yeah, echoing Frank's response, certainly if there are folks that have some input on this planning process, we'd love to hear from you directly or to follow up on. So the point of this effort is to solicit any feedback for this planning process of all along the coast of Oregon, and I welcome a follow-up conversation with the person who posed the question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And then we have a comment from Don Stover. Northwest Carpenters Union would like to be a supporting organization of this renewable energy and be involved where the organization can both politically support BOEM and support of its infrastructure build. So to Don, I would say it'd be great if they could put their contact information, send that to us, and we'll be sure to include them in the interested parties. Whitney, anything more to add there?
Not right now, but we do have a link at the end of our presentation for those that want to sign up for any updates and track our progress. So that'll go to all the participants.
Great, thank you. Andy, this next question's for you from Delia. Thanks for the information. Do you have an estimated timeline for the data review working group?
Only a general one, and that I believe it will be late spring, early summer. And then I think I'm on the next question as well. If you do notice a layer that is not loading, it says error loading layer. If you could click the help icon at the bottom left of the page or the bottom of the portal and let us know which layer is not working, then we can see if we can address that right away, whether the service still exists, and try and fix that. So that's something the administrators of the system would need to do.
Question, this one is for Whitney from Bob. How does BOEM plan to share this tool for increased use by stakeholders to inform the leasing task force members?
Bob, thanks for the question. I'm not sure if I fully understand. This tool is, I'm in a room that where all the lights just went out. Sorry about that. This tool is publicly available, and really this webinar today is sort of our full presentation to the public and to the task force. The task force is aware of OROWIndMap as I communicate to them regularly, and hope that not only that it's used now for this data gathering effort, but this tool is continued to be used throughout the BOEM authorization process, after the call with the wind energy areas, through leasing all the way up to the construction operations plan. This is a wonderful tool to provide public access to the best available data.
Great, thanks, Whitney. And they've got a couple more questions here, but while I ask the last two, if there is anybody that would like to ask a verbal question, go ahead and raise your hand, and so that we can get you in the queue. We've just got a couple minutes to allow for some verbal questions as well. David asks, what is the time frame of the data catalog review?
Yeah, so once we start in late spring or early summer, we need to conclude that effort by fall so that any results from that effort can be incorporated into our report for the task force later in the fall.
All right, thank you. Looks like Liz says the link for the slides takes us to a page not found. I'm going to ask for Bianca to check that link and put it in the chat to all panelists and participants and attendees to make sure that everybody has the link that's working. Okay, and then one more question here from Don. Who are the contacts to speak with about ensuring strong labor standards on these projects?
I can take that question. Thank you. Thanks, Don, for the question. Where we are right now in planning is really to best identify the best potential sites for leasing and potential development, and through the planning process beyond or after lease issuance is to a specific developer and that developer's plans. And so if you're referring to labor standards that would influence the planning process on the front end of potential siting, now is the time, and please contact me. And if your question is more related to a specific project, the answer is would be coming soon, and still contact me, and I'll make sure that you're informed when we're at that stage of the process.
Great, thank you, Whitney. And I did ask for anyone who wanted to ask a question verbally to raise their hand. We don't have any hands raised at this time. Let's see. Abigail says they still have difficulty opening a link. So again, we'll have Bianca check on that and make sure that we have the right link in for all the panelists and attendees so that you have the right information. So still not seeing any hands raised, and no more questions are coming in through the Q&A. We're at 11:25, so I think at this point, Whitney, yep, let's see, yep, there is one, Abigail. Abigail, I've just unmuted you, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to say the reason the links aren't working, I noticed that the sentence punctuation is included in some of the links. So if people take off the comma or the period from the links will work.
Great, thanks, Abigail. And then I just see that Bianca put in the link into all panelists and attendees, so you should have a live link there. All right, there is another question here from Marjorie. Didn't BOEM issue some sort of labor standards agreement with one of the offshore wind developers? She has some recollection of that. I don't know.
Marjorie, I'll take the first stab at that. I'll have to follow up. If there was a labor standards agreement with one of the offshore wind developers, it was on the East Coast, and I'm representing the Pacific office. So let me check in with colleagues, and I'll follow up with you directly.
Okay. So with that, Whitney, it looks like we are at our next step slides for you to take it from there.
Great, thank you, Jamie. Thanks to all the participants, and I really enjoyed the dialogue and conversations, and I'll take the responsibility for setting up links with the periods or commas at the end. I'm not the best at multitasking. But in terms of our discussion and next steps, I wanted to provide this slide to folks so everyone has the links all in one place. So please explore OROWIndMap, see what data is already there. And if you know of data sets that are missing, let us know. And we have a fact sheet there that was previously shared by Andy on how specifically to upload those relevant data sets. As it relates to our planning process, if you'd like to stay informed on what we're doing and what BOEM is doing in the state of Oregon, please visit our website. We try our best to keep all information there, including our publicly available standing meetings. In our COVID world right now, we thought the best way to engage with others was to request to present at meetings that were already being organized, as opposed to trying to organize all these other separate meetings and feared to have a limited participation. That said, we are planning to have a series of public meetings via webinars, and this we have the save the date on our website for May 12th and May 13th. Additionally, if you don't want to come visit our website every day, you can sign up for announcements, and this will be the way that that we will communicate with you on Oregon activities to date. If you have any questions about this planning process, or if you know that there are organizations that would like to hear about our planning process, please don't hesitate to contact myself or Andy Lanier. So with that, I just want to again say thank you. Thank you to Kearns & West, our facilitator. Thanks to Andy and DLCD with all of the wonderful work with OROWIndMap, and to Frank, thank you for your presentation on data sets, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah. This concludes our presentation for today. Thank you for joining us.